The story itself was the star of the movie. It's not just some shallow action movie with some immortality uh, tacked on in the background, just an excuse for the action. Hi, I'm Kit, and I'm going to talk about the 2020 Netflix movie, The Old Guard. What most people would recognize about it is that it stars Charlize Theron. It's an action science fiction movie, and it's pretty good. So I'll talk about it from a science fiction viewpoint and also compare it with other movies, and also talk about it from a storytelling viewpoint. It's a very watchable movie. In terms of action, it might not be the best. It's definitely entertaining enough. The most interesting part would be the science fiction and storytelling aspect. The immortality part, which I'm not I'm not spoiling anything. It's in the trailer. You obviously have comparisons with Highlander, maybe even a bit of Wonder Woman. Most interestingly, Hancock, which also starred Charlize Theron. So let's talk about the good first. What worked? Well, it's based on a graphic novel by Greg Rucka, who also wrote the screenplay. And as you might expect from a movie that is based on a graphic novel, the story itself is above average. I was pleasantly surprised by the quality of the storytelling. The extrapolation of the idea of immortality and the consequences on the characters, while there are certain unbelievable aspects, they do use the immortality aspect quite well to develop the story. They do make good use of foreshadowing, so certain things are kind of like explained or introduced beforehand before they are actually used in a major way. So you're not surprised, you're not saying, hey, how come they can do that? So this is just very standard, very well done storytelling. There's also a sense of believable jeopardy. Somehow they made you care enough about the characters and managed to put them in enough believable danger that throughout the movie you do worry about them. And there's a good restrained use of flashbacks, because obviously being immortals, there's a lot of backstory, there's a lot of old history to get across. And these are shown in very brief flashbacks, so it doesn't bog down. The story itself was the star of the movie. It's not just some shallow action movie with some immortality tacked on in the background, just an excuse for the action. The characters are good. There are like 7 main characters. You've got the bad guy, the CEO of this pharmaceutical company, who wants to kidnap these immortals and find out what makes them immortal so that he can make an immortal drug. He's the most disappointing character of all. He's your standard bad guy. More interesting is Copley, the ex-CIA guy who hunts them down. And then you've got the 4 old guard, the 4 immortals, and joined by this young female Marine soldier who just discovered that she's immortal. This is a standard technique in storytelling. You have this newcomer. She's the audience proxy or representative. So the other characters in the story can explain what's going on to her. Otherwise, they don't have an excuse to explain how all this immortality stuff works. So as they're explaining it to her, they're actually explaining to you, the audience. I wasn't expecting much from the supporting characters, but they actually do come across as quite 3-dimensional characters. So that was a nice surprise. Charlize Theron, yeah, As the main character, uh, she is developed quite interestingly. The new immortal, the young female marine soldier, uh, didn't work out as well. So the characters did work enough for you to really hold your interest. But unfortunately, not more than that. This will not be a classic like Highlander or John Wick. There's nothing all that special about it. The characters are good enough to hold your interest, but they don't really grab you. There's some distance somehow. They just don't go that extra last bit that makes characters really special and really memorable. Immortality is kind of hard to pull off because I mean, really, I mean, well, what does it mean that you can't be killed? Does it mean that, I mean, no matter what happens, if you're blown up, yeah, I mean, if you're crushed, if your head is cut off, you'll still be alive? This story, they take this expansive view of immortality and they say, yes, you cannot be killed. Unless mysteriously, which forms part of the plot, it just disappears and they don't know why, and don't know when. Some of these immortals will lose their immortality. But it's just too unbelievable that aside from that, I mean, no matter what is done to you physically, you just will not die. I mean, it's believable if you say that, okay, if nothing really bad physically happens to you, then you're immortal, sure. But at least in Highlander, if they cut off your head, yeah, then you die. That's easy to sell. So they tried to sell this really hard version of immortality, and for me, from a hard science fiction viewpoint, that didn't work. I would be willing to overlook that. The difficult part of the immortality is imagining a character that lives for centuries or millennia. So Charlize Theron's character is supposed to be the oldest character of all, and she's supposed to be like thousands of years old. Her sidekicks are like maybe a few centuries old, and even them, they don't feel old. Sure, you're immortal, you look young, but you would expect them to behave and think very differently, and they don't. They just seem like normal people. If they just cut off all the parts that said how old they were and you just watched the movie, you wouldn't be able to guess that they were supposed to be hundreds or thousands of years old. I'm setting a pretty high bar. This is a rather rigorous science fiction standard, but that's where I'm coming from. I mean, you have it in other stories, especially the vampire stories also, where if you live for so long, they don't amass a huge fortune. I mean, if you live so long, you learn so much. Surely you'd be able to become really rich and use that as a part of your protection, right? Especially in this story where these immortals are supposed to be like do-gooders, they're out to save the world. Yeah, money gives you power, it gives you protection, it gives you the ability to help people. And they don't seem to have a lot of it. And even their military skills, their fighting skills, well, aside from being immortal, they are supposed to be like really skilled fighters, but it doesn't really show. Well, of course they win their fights. I mean, what do you call it? Plot armor. They are not believably, exceptionally superior to the other military guys. If you do not tell the audience how old, how experienced they're supposed to be, you just cut those parts out of the movie and you just show it to people and ask them to guess. They wouldn't be able to guess because it just doesn't come across. Actually, both sides are not very strong tactically. For example, they hardly do any recon of an area. They just go straight in and attack. instead of like waiting for a few hours, you just observe the site. You see who goes in, you see who goes out. Before you attack. I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice, you have to go in straight away, but they do. A lot of times they do have the choice and they don't. So they've got a very bad situational awareness. We are all spoiled by things like John Wick now, and they do try, they just don't succeed. You wouldn't be watching it for the fight scenes. They're good enough, but they don't really stand out, and especially they do not sell the idea that these are like super duper old, experienced fighters. I just want to end with a slight retrospective on Charlize Theron's movies. The first action movie I saw in was in Aeon Flux, which wasn't a success, but it's worth watching. It's actually not bad. Then there's Hancock, one of my favorite superhero movies. Definitely watch that if you haven't. Recently was Atomic Blonde, which was actually pretty bad. Story-wise, and even her fighting, she moved very well in Aeon Flux, but somehow she was really clumsy in Atomic Blonde. Her fighting, I don't know whether that was done on purpose or not, but it just looked bad. She's a lot better here, and yeah, that's all I got. It's a good movie. It's not great. It's worth watching. You probably will not remember it in 5 years' time.